Shalom, family, and thank you so much for joining us here at Remnant House, the home of the strong and very courageous, for our weekly news update. And we're always happy to sit with you so we can be informed. As we always like to say around here, we want to be informed without being overwhelmed. And I want to apologize to everyone that was expecting us last night. I know, I was disappointed as well. We had some technical challenges. We had to upgrade the Remnant Watch website. And when we did that, well, as any of you have ever experienced, when you upgrade one part, but you better run and upgrade everything else because it ripples, and of course it broke. So that was it. We had to work on that and get it back up to speed. And so it's back. It's good. It's ready to go. But it did take a minute, and we did have to get it so that it was a little more secure and a little more bulletproof. So again, those of you that are joining us for the first time, or maybe you're going to be watching, we do have a website called remnantwatch.com, remnantwatch.com. And it's where we put all the stories that we're going to discuss, not only tonight, but also previous stories as well. And you'll find that we have a handy search bar. Yep, we were able to put that right back in there. And you can use that to find previous discussions that we've had. And we do leave these survival guides up here because so far I haven't come up with a good reason to take them down, because there continues to be more disasters and more difficult times around us. And so we need to be as much of a barakah, as much of a blessing, that's what that word means, as we can be. And so that is our hope for all of you, is that we can encourage you, strengthen you, give you a perspective that you otherwise wouldn't receive. Or if nothing else, we like to say we take that 10,000 foot view, and so looking at things through the lens of the scripture and not allowing ourselves to get too caught up in the cares of this world, the deceitfulness of riches, and the lust of other things. And many people are today realizing that they were falsely prophesied to. And so there may be some disappointments out there. This is not a good day to do I told you so's. This is a good day to be loving. And remember Ephesians 4:32. Be ye kind one to another. It's a great verse. When my children were small, we made a song about that. So very, very good thing to continuously remind yourselves to be kind one to another. And on that note, let's get into the news. And today's top story is that the sudden shift in the world, while everyone is paying attention to some other things domestically, which we're going to get to, there are some big things happening that pertain to Bible prophecy, scriptural prophecy. And we're seeing a culmination of serious conflict coming about. And so now the UK has officially recognized Palestine as a state. So while everyone was paying attention to some other things, Sir Keir Starmer said the UK, alongside Australia, Canada, and Portugal, was taking the step in the face of growing horror in the Middle East. And so the statement he releases today: we revive the hope of peace for the Palestinians and Israelis and two-state solution. The United Kingdom formally recognizes the state of Palestine. Now, why is it significant that this be done by the state of by England, if you will, or the UK as they're known? Is because it's the very same place that the state of Israel filed their paperwork. And so if you do a little homework, you'll find that that's the very same entity that recognized the state of Israel, which had to refile its statehood in London not very long ago. People didn't notice that. We noticed it. And now they've got a Palestinian state. And if it's recognized by the very same ones who recognized your state, you got yourself a problem, you see. So this is now becoming an international challenge. And what is happening is Zechariah prophesied that Jerusalem would become a cup of trembling. Well, it looks like they've done it again. They're making Jerusalem yet another cup of trembling. And so very important that we be sensitive in this hour, especially for those people that we're expecting to whisk away. I continue to remind everyone and say this very gently and lovingly: he will not rapture a thief. So even if that were today, many, many people would still be just standing here. So this is something that we need to be very sensitive to, but kind to our brethren, because they are under many, many deceptions, as you can see. Okay, so let's be sensitive to that. A lot of people are going to be disappointed, heartbroken. I mean, we have to be people that know and understand the hour that we're in. And it's very important that we be a wise people in this hour. And of course, Israel's reacting to these things. We're going to get that in a minute, but the momentum is shifting hard. And so according to this report, the Palestinian officials are getting quite brazen, saying Israel will kneel to world pressure. That's what one of the Palestinian Authority ambassador to the United Nations basically said, that they will increase international pressure on Israel. And I commented a year ago and have been commenting through this time period about the fact that it does appear that they have taken a quite different tack with Israel than Israel expected. And so I think Israel expected more physicality and more war, and has consistently tried to provoke it into full, like full conflagration, and it just hasn't happened. And it's been overly one-sided, and the more one-sided it is, the more it looks the way it looks, right? So this is a very dangerous time, and it looks like this is being set up for a massive, massive confrontation, is what it looks like to me, to this one observer. I'd love your thoughts, but I do sense that there's a lot of setup going on out in the world. And of course, you start seeing reports like this, which of course, everyone knows the relationship that President Trump has with bin Salman, the crown prince of Saudi Arabia. And Saudi Arabia has warned Israel about annexing Judea and Samaria. Now, you may not know much about the way that the House of Saud operates and so forth, or their origin, but if you do know their history, you know that that's a very interesting thing for them to be standing where they're standing. So such a move could also threaten the Abraham Accords, Israel's normalization agreements with several Arab states. So they will be taking a step backward if they take that step. And Saudi Arabia has warned Israel that annexing any part of Judea and Samaria would carry major implications in all fields, Israeli media reported on Sunday. So the warning coincided in a wave of new recognitions of a Palestinian state, with Portugal, the United Kingdom, Canada, and Australia all declaring support within the same day. So it is clear that there is a massive ramp up of attention on this topic. And I think that that's a good thing, because I think the more eyes that are on it, the faster we'll beat our swords into plowshares, folks. I mean, the more we are disgusted by war from any perspective. It doesn't matter who's winning, who's losing, who's the good guy, who's the bad guy. We don't care. We don't care. We are done caring about the good guy, bad guy thing. What we're seeing is destruction. What we're seeing are children crying. What we're seeing is babies. That's all we see. We don't care about the good guy, bad guy thing after that point. When we start to see that, we don't care. We don't want to hear the arguments anymore. We want it to stop. And I believe that's the right kind of pressure in the spirit to say, enough of this. I get it. You're disagreeing. I get it. You got a problem. I get it. You don't see things eye to eye, but bombing each other is not the answer. How many know that's the truth, right? So we see that in many ways. How many know that's verbally done before it becomes physical? That's why we watch the verbal jabs and the statements made by heads of state, because they project before. If you'd have been paying attention to Putin before the invasion of Ukraine, you would have heard lots of verbiage that told you he was running out of patience, and that if Ukraine kept going, that he was going to attack them. And sure enough, they kept pushing it, and it was all verbal, until finally they went, okay, we've had enough of you, right? And so this is the way these things go. That's why I pay attention to the, when if you're growing up, you've seen enough bullies and you've seen enough fights, okay, this one's getting hot, right? And any parent is, if you've ever refereed, come on, guys. You guys are all referees. I mean, you're with me here. You got whistles, you got flags. You already know when things are getting, ooh, this, I better jump in here, right? How many grandpas right now are going, boy, you don't even know, right? They got to keep the peace because we know the smell of conflict when we see it. And if you're a good oil, if you're a good dad or a good grandpa, right, you're putting oil on things, right? Well, we can smell fights coming, and they're gearing up for confrontation. So here you've got, of course, Australia joining in, and UK and Canada, and formally recognizing the Palestinian state. This is big news, folks. This is as big as it gets, and yet it's being sort of obscured by some other activities. So that's kind of an interesting thing. There's other big news items that came out in the last couple of weeks as well that have been obscured by some of what we're seeing. And again, I don't necessarily think it's a bad thing. Some people are like, oh, it's a psyop. It's a psyop. This probably is. There's all kinds of things about this that are wicked. I agree. I see Masonic stuff all over the place. So do I. But you know what I also saw? I saw Americans getting up at 4 a.m. And I know there's a whole lot of employers out there. Come on, somebody. They went, oh, mira tú. Oh, you can get up at 4 a.m. Oh, okay. Okay. So you can get going. You just need to go reset. Right? And how many know that, people suddenly saying, hey, I want to stand up for the truth. Hey, I want to dig into this. Hey, I want to fight back. It's not a bad thing. So I see the Ruach doing something. The king's in the field, guys. So be careful out there. And there's a lot that is changing atmospherically, spiritually speaking, and we need to be sensitive to that. And so, of course, you knew that Israel was going to respond to. I mean, they can't help themselves. My goodness, this guy was out there within 5 minutes of recent events. So he definitely wants to comment. Netanyahu, of course, responded. He says, Israel will respond to Palestinian statehood moves within days. Palestine would endanger our existence. Yes, that is exactly what they're suggesting, and that's why they're endorsing it. They want to endanger Israel's existence. And unfortunately, it's not because of the land or even the people, but the government that is in Israel. That is, of course, the point of consternation. Ahead of a scheduled speech in the United Nations General Assembly on Friday, Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu said at his weekly cabinet meeting that Israel will respond to calls to establish a Palestinian state at the Conference of World Leaders in the coming days, calling for a fight against the move, which he says would endanger Israel's existence. And he is correct. At the UN, I will present the truth, that is Israel's truth, but it is also the objective truth in our just struggle against the forces of evil and our vision for real peace. With a backdrop of Gaza in utter ruin, it makes it difficult to make that case. And that's where they're running into the challenge, is they're trying to explain that they're the victims while they're standing on rubble. So he says, we will also have to fight in the UN and all arenas against the false propaganda directed at us and the calls for the establishment of a Palestinian state, which would endanger our existence and constitute an absurd reward for terror. An absurd reward for terror. He makes a good point about that. Do you want to reward terrorism? Do you want to reward terroristic acts with positive results? Because aren't you then encouraging more terrorism in the hopes that they'll get positive results? So you just make a good point. There for a long time, the United States did have and maintained an attitude of no negotiation of any kind with any terrorism or terrorist, right? So that was our position, and I believe, a correct one. I remember when I was in the military in the early '80s and under Reagan, and when he came in, he was very clear with the Iranians and so forth that he was not going to negotiate. That if you don't let our hostages go, we will come and get them. And we're not playing, and we will take out people. And then, of course, as soon as he came in, they let him go. If you guys remember the historical record, Iran let the hostages go right away as soon as Reagan came in. So that policy was the policy of the United States for a long time. It seems to have changed over the years. So that opens the door for enemies to think that tactic works, right? So you end up with more terrorism as a result. So it's a really good policy to say we just will not bend to terrorism. However, the question that is now being presented before the international body is, who is the terrorist? That's the question that is now being presented. And that's a worthy question of discussion because, again, we're not talking about the people of Israel. We're not talking about the geography of Israel even so much, although they are discussing the two-state solution. But what I'm referring to is that there's a separation, just as in the United States or any place, between the people of that place and its representative government. And so I believe that the pushback is more against the representative government than anything else. However, it still affects the people that are there, the people living there. My understanding is that if you were an Israeli citizen, your restrictions on movement were considerable. So you couldn't get out of that place if you wanted to. That's a challenge that you start looking at some of these things and you wonder, oh boy, what are we being set up to see, right? So everybody keep your eyes open and definitely be praying for your brothers and sisters throughout the earth, wherever they are, that his protection will remain upon them. And of course, now, again, the sides are definitely pitting. So this is a big story, guys. It's very much the lead of what we're talking about today. For those that are paying attention to world events, world leaders are rallying behind the Palestinian statehood at UN, and they are defying Israel and the United States. Dozens of world leaders. So it's not just the countries that have come out so far, but dozens of world leaders are gathered at the United Nations on Monday, yesterday, to embrace the Palestinian state, a landmark diplomatic shift nearly 2 years into the Gaza war that faces fierce resistance from Israel and its close ally, the United States. And President Emmanuel Macron, which we talked about this, right? We talked about the fact that there were going to be, without question, some pushback because remember, bin Salman, Saudi Arabia's bin Salman, along with Macron, was kicking this effort off. So we knew there was going to be this, but here we go, folks. The most far-right government in Israel's history has declared there will be no Palestinian state as it pushes on with its fight against militant group Hamas in Gaza following the October 7th, 2023 attack on Israel that killed some 1,200 people. It appears to still be killing more because my understanding is tens of thousands of people have now lost their lives in this conflict. And then they continue to say these things. We must pave the way for peace. Well, it's kind of hard when you're bombing everybody. So that's kind of hard to do. You start stirring up too much of that vengeance, that eye for the eye thing. And it's hard not to. You just kill somebody's husband or so kill somebody's dad. Now that child's going to want to come get you. I mean, it just never ends. An eye for an eye will make the whole world blind. Right. So it just ends with nothing but destruction. And so that is why it's meant to be a deterrent, not the status quo. It was never meant to be status quo. And so, unfortunately, there is a lot of pushback. And now, one of the challenges I'm watching, because again, I lived there for 9 months, we got a lot of acclamation to Israel and to its people. And that's why I can tell you that representative government is just that. It's a representative government of a certain portion of the people, but certainly not everybody. And certainly not you folks, right? We'll take a look at this. Most Americans are saying Israel has gone too far in the Gaza conflict. So regardless of what America's government does, the people of the United States are starting to really turn on this conflict. Okay, so the public sentiment, which I think is what led to the assassination of Charlie Kirk, who was also starting to turn on this topic, but the public opinion on this topic is not favorable to Israel. They're having a difficult time turning public opinion. At a moment of growing international alarm about the humanitarian situation in Gaza, more U.S. adults view Israel's military action in the Palestinian territory as excessive than at the beginning of the war, according to the new poll. About half of Americans say the military response from Israel in the Gaza Strip has gone too far, according to the survey from the Associated Press. And that's up from November 23, when 40% said Israel's actions had gone too far. So it's growing. And at the same time, Americans overall, particularly Republicans, are less likely to say that the negotiating a ceasefire should be a high priority for the U.S. government than they were just a few months ago when the U.S. was holding ceasefire talks with Hamas. And has anyone noticed that we don't talk about those ceasefire talks anymore? That you're not seeing headlines about ceasefire talks? You want to know why? Because the last time they did that and they started to gather, Israel bombed them. That's when they bombed Qatar. What do you think they were coming together to discuss? So somebody wants a fight. Somebody just wants war. Something, some spirit, because we don't wrestle against flesh and blood. We wrestle against principalities, right? But some spirit's really trying to create war. And it's interesting, some of the timing. So I thought this was, how many thought this was kind of interesting? I'm only pointing this out because of when it occurred. It happened, he did the recognition after Trump's state visit. That's interesting, don't you think? I mean, we keep hearing about the United States and Israel standing together, right? Yet this is coincidental, and I smell something changing here. Other nations, including France, Australia, and Canada, plan to take the same step next week at the UK and UN summit, right? So something changed when Trump went and met with Stallmer, and they were awful chummy over there, over the pond, talking about digital this and new initiatives that, while they're also talking about the demise of certain things. We're going to get into this, guys. So I think there's a bit of a setup happening right now, and everyone is in on it except you. Right? So, they're not going to tell you, unless they have to, what's really happening in the world. And instead, what they're going to do is they're going to continue to sort of obscure their movements until so that you can't take advantage. Bottom line, they don't want you to know what's really going on. And I believe that there's a coordinated effort going on that makes it look like we're going to all go to war. But there's something else. There's a war going on, but I don't think it's quite the war we're being told. This was interesting. So Russia's gray zone invasion plan to start World War III before Christmas revealed by a defector. Uh-oh. Ooh, that's not good. Okay. So the warning from a top Russian general has triggered urgent discussions in the UK and US about the risk of a denial strike aimed at fracturing NATO. Moscow is preparing a gray zone attack on Poland before Christmas, a senior Russian military official has revealed. The warning sent to an Eastern European ally during London's DSEI arms fair last week has triggered urgent discussions in the UK and US about the risk of denial strike aimed at fracturing NATO. And again, with Donald Trump already saying, he's not a real big NATO fan. He's not exactly ready to be triggered by that. I think that is indicative of a shift that is starting to really show itself in the real world. We saw it a couple years ago manifesting in some of the conversation, but now it's coming down to brass tacks. Brass tacks is where we're headed, folks, okay? So we were not shocked to see that the United States, we knew this couldn't last forever. I mean, these guys are too independent or too interdependent. These countries and their economies are too intertwined. There's no way to separate them. And there's no way, one goes down, they both go down. So they got to sit down, right? They have to. And thankfully, for those who are watching the economic picture, Xi and Trump did hold pragmatic, positive, constructive phone talks where basically President Trump begged for money. Bottom line. Okay. And, there's only so much that the Chinese are willing to do with the current regime or the current status, because the corporation tethered to the Federal Reserve, which has already publicly said it is not part of the government. Well, in that case, let's detach. Okay. Heads of state diplomacy plays an irreplaceable role in providing strategic guidance for China's U.S. expert ties. And of course, China's President Xi Jinping on Friday held phone talks with U.S. President Donald Trump, during which he said China and the U.S. can achieve mutual success and shared prosperity, but if you think you're leaving us in the dust, that ain't going to happen. That's my paraphrase, right? Because China's not playing that game, and the U.S. was basically trying to put China back in its place, like you're just a third world country that got a little uppity, and we helped you get there. So you remember that we helped you get there. Yeah, you might have helped them get there, but now you're on the other side. Okay, and that's something else that got to change your bargaining position. And so I think that that's what's starting to hit very hard, and they're starting to realize that if they don't start making more intelligent maneuvers, well, there won't be a United States. Either way, we're headed for change. And by the way, getting back to that Eastern European conflict, Putin is revealing a number of troops that he's got engaged. And I think NATO is suddenly starting to realize that if they're going to take him on, they better be prepared for a real big fight, because he's got some 700,000 that are currently at the front, the Russian president said. Nearly half of Moscow's active duty personnel are currently engaged in the conflict with Ukraine, Russian President Vladimir Putin said, and the president made the remarks on Thursday during a meeting with leaders in the parliamentary groups. He revealed the figure was discussing the Time of Heroes program, which aims to train veterans for public service. More than 700,000 troops are stationed along the line of contact, so we have to select from among them. Isn't that something? So he's letting you know how many, almost, that's 750,000 soldiers. That's an army. That's a serious army. And I don't believe that Europe has one to match. And that's not all the Russian army. And that's not the Chinese, which have what was it? Something like 100 million or 200 million man army, something like that, some ridiculous number. So, we definitely don't want to see world war. That would not be good. That would not be a good thing. So we definitely want to continue to pray for wisdom and peace. Shalom. This is why we're here, right? That's what we do. We pray for shalom. And of course, things go really bad if you start having conflict, and that conflict can manifest in various ways. How many never even thought about this one? This is really, really dangerous when you really think about the fact that China could make EVs explode. Cyber expert is warning. I thought that was really telling, like, oh my goodness. Because I just read a story the other day. I'm not going to share it, but there was a story that a father and his two daughters were burned alive in an electric car, one of these electric cars, because the firemen could not open the doors. And because they couldn't open the doors, they couldn't get them out. And they burned alive inside the car. Can you imagine standing there seeing such a sight? Talk about terrorism, right? So millions of Chinese devices are ticking time bombs, according to EV, which could be remotely disabled or made to explode. That is really, really bad news. Millions of Chinese-made internet-connected devices in Australia are potentially ticking time bombs, including electric vehicles, which could be remotely disabled or made to explode. And I don't know if this is a scare tactic. I don't know if this is a pushback against the electric car business. I don't know if it's just aimed at China and trying to throw shade against China to make them look, like a criminal enterprise. But I don't think it matters who made the car. Yeah. So if they just tipped their hand, right? I don't think it matters who made the car. It doesn't matter if it's China or other car makers. What's to say they all don't have the ability to do that? So did they just tip their hand? Did somebody just in the effort to say they're the bad guys just tell everybody what they all could do? Ouch. That's a bit of a terrifying thought, right? So, which I think is probably their intention. Terrorists make you scared. And I think that's another reason why we always have to do these broadcasts, bring that fear level down a little bit. You do need to be informed, though, so you got to make choices that are wise, and you've got to plan on certain things, like being locked in your car might be one of them, right? There's things you should have to break windows and things like that. If you got a car that could potentially lock you in, you better be prepared to figure out a way out of that, and that's getting very, very serious these days. Speaking of serious, Russia is taking up a notch and taking advantage of this moment where there's a lot of attention to say this. And I thought this was very interesting. Do you guys see where this is published, guys? This is on Barron's. This is not some, off the wall, some off the beaten path National Enquirer kind of public, not rag. This is Barron's. This is a major financial publication. It's been around my whole life. And so this is huge to see this title of this article. Russia to seize the assets of international Satanists. Am I reading that right? You seeing this, folks? Okay. Russia on Friday added what it termed the international Satanism movement to a financial blacklist, enabling to freeze the assets of alleged members even if they have no criminal record. Moscow has put several non-existent organizations on the blacklist of terrorists and extremists in recent years, including the International LGBT Movement and the Anti-Russian Separation Movement. As such groups are vaguely defined under Russian law, prosecutors can accuse anyone of being a member, giving Moscow a free hand to pursue political opponents, according to critics. Russia's Supreme Court declared the International Satanism Movement extremist in July after prosecutors accused its members of desecrating Orthodox Christian churches and spreading hatred. The movement is closely linked to manifestations of radical nationalism and neo-Nazism, Russia's prosecutor general said in a statement in July. And of course, I believe they're really targeting those who are involved in the making of blood products that are forbidden in the scripture. We are commanded, according to the scripture, never to even touch these things. And then there are those who produce those things. So if you're awake in these last few years and you're aware of the things that evil people do in the dark, if you will, if you're not ignorant of that, well, then you can read between the lines there, right? And understand what is the real target of this. So that's what's lending to a lot of people thinking that really this isn't what we think it is. In other words, there's a war going on, but it's not quite the people we thought. You automatically think like the citizens of Russia are going against the citizens of Ukraine, and it's really not the case. And so this is kind of an interesting thing as you look at it. And again, representative governments versus the people on the ground. The people on the ground a lot of times have no skin in the game when it comes to these conflicts. So understanding that makes us more sensitive and compassionate to the victims of these conflicts. And of course, there are those with an agenda, and they've made it clear. They even named it. They called it the 2030 agenda. I mean, it's hard to say you don't have an agenda when you named it an agenda, right? I mean, that's what you called it. So we're just calling it what you called it. You called it an agenda. And boy, oh boy, here's their guy out there pumping the agenda. We'll all have the best medical care. Don't you worry about a thing. You just let this robotic transfer happen. Don't worry about it. Don't pay no attention. There's nobody behind that curtain. It's going to be great, everyone. Just wonderful. I mean, Elon says so. So, it's true. Elon Musk says we'll all have the best medical care, food, housing, and everything else, and a universal high income when robots take over by 2030. Am I reading that correctly? Did I just... Yeah, that's on Yahoo, guys. It's not like, again, it's on Yahoo. I'm like, oh, what a bunch of Yahoos, right? Oh my goodness. What happens when robots take everyone's job? Well, it's not Judgment Day. It's not iRobot. No, it's prosperity. Yay. We're all doing great. What happens when robots take everyone's job? It's the question hanging over office chatter, think pieces, and late night drone scrolling, whatever that is. Okay. But Elon Musk, everyone losing sleep, he's been repeating for years that society won't just need a universal basic income. It needs something bigger. Let me help you out. If everyone has the same high income, all you end up with is inflation. So this is a silly game played with people who do not understand economics. And look at the answer. There will be universal high income. Yeah. Oh, you can give everybody $1 million a year, and it'll be Zimbabwe money. Okay. That's exactly what happens. You can give hey, you are a millionaire, my friend. I pay you $1 million. And now he has to go and he finds out that, paying for a car, well, that costs $500,000. Right. And all of a sudden it's relative. So that's the trick that they play. And it's very easily done by just waving numbers and the smell of cash, man. Right. And so they're going to continue to play this game with people. I believe it is a very horrible game. I believe it's very torturous and very cruel, because they're gaslighting you. It's something that drives you insane. And any one of you that have ever been gaslit by a narcissist, someone who told you they loved you, they're going to be your forever friend, and then one day they're just gone. Okay, they rug pulled you. If you've ever been through that, and I have, some of you watch me go through that publicly. People do that. It's just crazy, but they do, and it's very destructive. It's very hurtful. It's very painful to the victim, the person that's just left standing going, what in the world? Well, that's what a lot of what I see here is doing, is it's giving you answers that are just rug pulls, so that you put your trust in it, you think it's going to be great, and then boom, rug pull, psych. Oh, just kidding. Goalpost moved, and it's just inappropriate. So again, it's partly because we have lost honesty as a standard in our society. People don't feel the need to tell the truth. People feel that their truth can be relative. Okay, well, how's that working out for you, right? Now, something that I've been hearing about for nigh on almost 30 years, guys, is I used to be a space weather freak. I used to pay attention to all this stuff. So I started to figure out that it was basically a game. Okay. I'm not sure exactly how this entirely works, but I definitely know that it's not what's presented. And so I've been watching this pole flip thing. Here, let me put this on the screen. For 15, 20 years. Oh, the pole's going to flip any minute now. We're going to have a flip. Okay. Earth is going to face mass extinction as magnetic poles race toward catastrophe, the export warns. I've been saying this exact same thing, just like global warming was going to kill us all. You should just understand that. That's why I'm a little less moved by it, because I've heard it too many times. Bit of the boy who cried wolf, and a space weather expert has issued a dire warning. Notice that we don't have the name of the oh, we do. Okay, Ben Davidson. All right. Founder of Space Weather News told Matt Beal Limitless podcast that a rapid magnetic pole shift. This became a really popular thought. A lot of people talking about this. I think they're being gamed. And I think it's being used to cover up manipulation in weather that is being perpetrated against people. And so by continuing this narrative in the public, by keeping it out there, it becomes a backtrack explanation for odd events. That's my thoughts. What are your thoughts? That's what I see. I see it as an odd. It gives them a sort of a wild card. Oh, that must have been, oh my, it was almost the Carrington event. How many times have you heard about that? The Carrington event. How that if we had another event like the Carrington event, why it would just knock us back to the Stone Ages, right? Scare everybody. And not to say that they couldn't do that, right? They could mimic such a thing. That's more likely, in my mind, than what they're proposing. So I've seen near X-class flares and all this stuff, and we were thinking it's going to fry everything. It was going to shut down, and Earth barely felt it. So a lot of what we're seeing is manipulation. And I do believe that they are continuing to try to get you into transhumanism, to accept the robot domination, to accept AI domination, which is unacceptable. And you are not subject to devices. You are not subject to something someone can make in a lab. I'm sorry, you're just jurisdictionally not subject. Now, it can threaten you. It can say, you better put on these handcuffs or I'm going to shoot you. In which case, that point, anybody that's a societal move. The minute something like that would happen, where they're forcing subjugation to a piece of equipment, to a piece of robotry, there should be a mass revolt that day. That day, every robot should die. Every single one. Because anything that is going to take and try and usurp authority over man, who's made in the Most High's image and after his likeness, to steal basically all of his inalienable rights, should be met with massive levels of pushback, because you shouldn't be allowed to just be subjected to robots. There's no oath of office. There's no conveyance of authority. This is just a robot. What gives it authority over a man? Okay. And it shouldn't have any of that. So anybody suggesting that is the problem. And so that needs to be hard pushback against. Now, if you're no longer a person or a man or a woman in the original sense, and instead you are a new thing called homoborgenesis, which is now a new legal term, meaning you've been genetically modified, you don't have the same rights. They got to now discuss that. But that's because you now have a triple helix, right? So anybody that underwent that modification now has that challenge, legal challenge. And so now that they have, crossed that barrier, they're now talking about getting rid of smartphones because they intend, just like, remember that movie Total Recall where they had a phone in somebody's hand? Remember that movie? Okay. Well, look at this. Elon Musk, Mark Zuckerberg, and Sam Altman declare the end of smartphones. But Tim Cook isn't buying it just yet. Tech giants are quietly moving to kill the smartphone, betting on radical new devices that bypass screens entirely. Gee, I wonder what those might be. Maybe that little temple device that you stick on your head and it takes over your brain. Maybe one of those, right? They've got all kinds of fun ideas for how they can replace the smartphone that they got us all used to. Remember when you could take the battery out of that and reset it, and then you couldn't? Yeah. Smartphones were once the crown jewel of tech innovation may finally be approaching their twilight, according to recent data from IDC and Statista. Global smartphone shipments have slowed significantly over the last 5 years. Well, a lot of people have them already. And not only that, but they figured out that they're tracking devices and security holes and that you guys use them for nefarious purposes. So, yeah, they're going to lose some popularity as the truth gets out there. Good job, guys. Good job, Remnant. You guys did awesome. You blew their doors open. They're like, we're going to have to change plans. Why? Because certain people, we don't want to name who, are blowing the whistle on us. Okay. We're going to have to change tactics here. We're going to put the phone right into your body. That way you can buy or sell with it. You can call people, buy, sell, keep track of your accounts. It's all real good. Just put it right in the chip. You're good. You can even hear people right in your ear, man. You can just talk and say hello, and they'll watch. They're going to have all kinds of weird stuff they're going to try and do because they're selling it to you as a solution to all your problems. And I think there's a prophecy that speaks of such behavior, right? And again, these things tend to repeat themselves. Somebody says, well, that happened before. Yeah, and it may happen again. So hang on, right? In fact, how many know that we saw something else, a golden statue a long time ago? I remember a golden statue in the scripture. Anybody else remember that? Remember golden statue? You guys remember? Come on, you Bible students. You big old Daniel Bible student peoples. You know there was a golden statue out there, wasn't there? Come on now. You know about the golden statue? What you know about that? What you know about that? And what happened? They made them all bow. Except for 3 Hebrew boys who said, not today. I said, not today. And how many know it takes those who are willing to be a burnt offering? Okay, yeah, they had to be a memorial offering to free the rest. Giant Trump statue holding Bitcoin displayed outside the U.S. Capitol to mark the Fed rate decision. Fed's literally trying to survive right now because this Lisa Cook thing is actually going to cook them. So another play on words. A 12-foot golden statue of President Donald Trump holding a Bitcoin was installed outside the U.S. Capitol, coinciding with the Federal Reserve's upcoming interest rate decision on Wednesday. Who hears Nebuchadnezzar laughing right now? Just like, what? That's not a statue. I built a statue. That's not a statue. I'm not even kidding. You can't make this up, right? So that's definitely meant to harken back. That was meant to invoke that. Who feels like somebody back there is almost playing with us? Do you feel that? Okay. That's because there are some master manipulators behind the scenes who are playing the Christian community like a fiddle. And because of the preceded false doctrines and concepts, they're just having a blast. And so this is why it's so important for us to be patient, to be kind, to be loving, balanced voices in this time where a lot of people are going to have some struggle. And but getting on to some other news, I want to quickly point this out because some of you may be buying from Amazon. They are recalling vitamins sold on its website. I'm not privy to all of the details here. We do have an article on remnantwatch.com. Definitely encourage you to read that if you are buying different things on the Amazon website. Just a word of caution to everyone that they did put out a recall. So that's just something to be aware of, so that you know. And if you're traveling, this is something that just erupted in the last, I want to say, week and a half. Now, we've had a lot of problems with the airlines, right? We've had all kinds of challenges with airports and airplanes and so forth. So we've been watching sort of the Knicks, the death of 1,000 cuts of the airline industry. And now there's a cyber attack which disrupted European airports, including Heathrow and Brussels. So these are very big hubs for European movement. And of course, you know this scene, right, guys? Everybody knows this scene. Who likes this scene? Anybody? Nobody likes that. All right. Brussels, Frankfurt, London. A cyber attack on a provider of check-in and boarding systems has disrupted operations at several European airports, including London's Heathrow, the continent's busiest, causing flight delays and cancellations. Okay. And why I think this is significant is because it's indicative of the reality that the systems that we trust to be secure are not secure. Things that we thought were, the status quo, we thought was going to be okay, is not. So again, you need to know that if you're traveling, definitely be prayed up, man. That matters. And so be aware of that out there and make plans accordingly. Also need to be aware of the fact that we're moving into a much more hostile, more aggressive, kinetic time. So we saw kinetic movement with people getting up in the morning and going out to a stadium here in Arizona, the alpha and omega of the English language. I keep saying that. Arizona is very pivotal. There's something about this place that he continues to point out. And you saw an overflow. Some estimating up to 200,000 people tried to get into that stadium. So they are starting to line up way before. And so that tells you the atmosphere has a polarization going on. You've got a polarization to one direction, which is much more peaceful, reconciling. Reconciliation is on the ground. The altar of reconciliation is on the ground. So the atmosphere is being affected. But there are those forces who were hell-bent, for lack of a better way to say that. Maybe that's the best way to say that. They were hell-bent on bringing division and war and fighting. And so now they're even going to be more aggressive because they are losing that let's all fight, burn cities down thing when people get together and pray instead or unite instead. That doesn't work for tear the country down, right? So they're going to continue to do things on the other side to stoke a fight. And this is a good example of this, guys. All right. So this is why I'm pointing it out, because we need to be aware of it so we don't react. And I'm hoping that all of our brethren out there stay level-headed. Suspect in ABC Sacramento affiliate station shooting arrest. Look at this, and forget the fake justice, because they never seem to really have any real justice. But Sacramento officials confirmed that basically they released this guy for shooting up the news station. Can you believe this? Was arrested in connection with Friday's shooting in charge of assault with a deadly weapon, shooting into an occupied building, and negligent discharge of a firearm. I don't know how this guy's still walking the street. I honestly don't. I honestly don't know how you could just open fire on a news station and be out already in a couple of days. What a lawyer you've got. So this is becoming, we're descending into conflict, just pure conflict for conflict's sake, almost senseless conflict, which, by the way, all violence is senseless. So here we go. And of course, there's other things that are happening that match this as well. So we know that ethnos will rise up against ethnos. So kingdom against kingdom, people against people. We saw that in the scripture. We knew that was coming. We also know that pestilence would make a major impact, right? So when we see urgent outbreaks and things like this, we know, okay, this is just continuing to prove what we knew was going to happen. And one thing that I saw as far back as 2017, and I'll try to put this on the screen. Let's see if I can get this video for you guys. There it is. Okay, hang on a second. I'll put that on the screen. And the pushback, and I've been making note of this, the pushback that now is happening in Europe, again in Great Britain and England, is considerable. They're not putting up with the immigration situation as they once did. There's a massive anti-police pushback. Those are police cars that the crowd is basically ejecting, and the sheer number of them is the problem. Police are what are used for in civil situations. They are not meant for that kind of crowd management. So that's why they will depart. And then the ground belongs to the crowd. So you have what is known as anarchy, or, chaos. And on the one hand, they're angry against the establishment that created the situation. So the establishment can't come and fix it with force. It would be repelled. So we're seeing a shift going on in Europe, and I believe that shift is coming out here also in the United States. But thankfully, so far, has not gotten to that level. So let's pray that it doesn't, and instead that cooler heads can prevail and we can continue to deal with evil for what it is. Just deal with the evil and leave the good saints alone. Okay? And many Americans are dealing with their own issues. They're dealing with their battles. And of course, put this on the screen, getting a job in this economy has become much more difficult. And of course, the difficulty in finding employment is only going to increase because they're actually trying to move you into their universal income. So if you don't start partnering with your brethren, and if you don't start moving right now to join together with your brethren economically, they are going to put you in the poorhouse to force you to submit to them. So you have a choice right now. You can band together with your brethren, or you can roll the dice and hope that the thems out there, that their, pagan economy, if you will, is going to survive. I don't believe that's a good bet, but that, because the scripture tells us that they'll force you down to the point where a full day's wages will buy you a loaf of bread. And a mix of high borrowing costs, dwindling job opportunities, and growing economic and political uncertainty have left many U.S. households at a standstill, with many Americans saying how they feel unable to buy new homes, take new jobs, or move to new cities. And that's exactly the intention, to freeze you in place. You become an easy target. Okay? And that, I don't believe, is the will of the Most High. I believe He wants us to band together, unite in one accord, and push back united. So that way, those that are doing that are going to experience a different experience than those people that try to go it alone. And when you go it alone, you end up in that crowd. Just saying. If you go it alone, you end up in that crowd. Just like if you make no plans to get buried with the remnant, guess where you'll get buried? If you don't make any plans to be cared for, should you be physically ill with the remnant, guess who'll be the ones they'll be caring for? If you don't make plans to the other way, the default will kick in. And so a lot of people don't think about that. And this is where we end up as a result. So folks, this is why we bring these things up. So that you're aware of them and you're not making foolish decisions. One of the things that I continue to see and talk about, have for almost 30 years, I find people in 3 stages, or 3 states, if you will. Either they have no plan, they're in search of a plan, or they're executing a bad plan, one that will never even work, even if it were on the perfect, right? And so this is one of the reasons why we really, and this is a big reason why we are commanded to be together, that we dwell together in unity, not just once in a blue moon. No, He's very specific, and He's going to keep making His point. So who are surviving out in these places of conflict? The people that band together. Who's surviving in these places where there's economic turmoil? The people that band together. Who comes over from poor countries and ends up owning the 7-Eleven, the pizza shop, and the Chinese restaurant? The people that were willing to band together. Okay, well, 20 of them were living in an apartment, man, but they worked, and 3 years later, now they're driving Range Rovers, right? Why? Because they were willing to work together. They keep showing you the right example. They're doing it right in your face. How many times have we watched immigrants come into the United States, live in squalid conditions, and just work, work, work? And then 3 or 4 years later, they're not in squalid conditions anymore, constantly proving that unity is the answer. I don't know how else to say that. But those that have figured it out, congratulations. That's a billion with a B. That's an inside joke. That's a billion with a B. You'd have to be on the inside to know that joke. But anyway, last thing I wanted to share with you is this thing. I don't think most of you knew this. I didn't know this. But did you know did you know there was even a plane called the Doomsday Plane? Did you even know there was such a thing? I didn't even know that. So the only plane that I knew the government flew that was like danger, danger, Will Robinson would be Air Force One, right? Or Air Force Two or something, with the presidents on there. And, you saw the movie. Come on, you saw Air Force One. You know all the stuff they got on that plane. Things a floating fortress, right? Or flying fortress, they call it. Right? So I was a little shocked when I learned about this. This is a different plane, and it's very interesting. The U.S. Air Force E-4B Night Watch, ominously dubbed the Doomsday Plane, didn't know about this, okay, was spotted soaring over Fort Worth, Texas. Oh, now that's interesting, because Texas had some really interesting weather, like hail that came down, went through roofs and cars and all kinds of stuff. The mysterious mission has left onlookers buzzing, and the jet, rarely seen by civilians, turned heads with its eerie green zinc chromate coating, giving it a stripped-down, naked appearance. The secretive aircraft serves as a flying command post for the president and top military brass, equipped to direct nuclear strikes and manage critical operations in times of crisis. What was it doing over Texas? The Pentagon isn't saying, but the sighting of this high-stakes war machine has sparked intense curiosity. So is the United States preparing for war? It does appear that there's conflict brewing. Next week, we'll be talking about the buildup in the Gulf of America, now that it's called, and the conflict that's growing with Venezuela, the potential conflict that may be coming to an end that is slowly backing up with China and the United States, as the United States did not send the arms, or did not do the arms deal. I'm still waiting to see more details on that, so I don't want to talk further about that. We'll talk about that next week. But it looks like the United States backed off its support for Taiwan a little bit as a concession to China. So the geopolitical situation is now fluid. We are in a state of flux. I wouldn't be shocked at anything at this point. Now, I want to remind everybody that President Trump made several comments about the October 1st deadline. And I just want to put this back on the screen, because this is a real thing. And if the U.S. is going to go through a transition, it's going to likely be very difficult for people as it does. So if the rumors are true that the United States is about to go through a massive economic transition, then this will be a difficult winter for many people. So keep them in prayer. The federal government could shut down if Republicans and Democrats fail to reach a consensus bill and fund the government. But again, even if they write a bill, that doesn't automatically mean that that countries are buying treasury bonds, right, guys? So you can write all the bills you want. It doesn't matter if no one's buying the bonds. And the Federal Reserve is, well, it's squarely in the American people's sights at this time. So I would keep an eye on the crypto market, how it's probably going to absorb a lot of that attention. We certainly saw the metals market change, and that has now spiked up. We see gold at the highest levels in my lifetime anyway. So I definitely see a change occurring, and I believe they're setting us up. So those of you that are getting that same feeling, well, we agree. Please share your comments. I love your thoughts. I'm so grateful for those of you that come along and share your own insights, especially you veterans out there, my brothers and sisters out there who have been praying and interceding, some of you ministry veterans, and some of you have been standing in faith for many, many years to see some of the things we're seeing today. Hold on, your redemption draws nigh. Well, thank you so much for joining us. I pray this broadcast has been a barakah to you, and thank you again for joining us here on the morning version of the weekly news update. We might leave it here if you guys like this better. Whichever works is what we want to do. Thank you so much for joining us. May he bless each and every one of you. Have a great day.